you remember when you first realized that your family actually has a business and that you're part of this sort of legacy?
I actually do remember very vividly the many times. I don't know if it was the first time, but the many times as a child, maybe 5, 6. I have an older brother, a year older than me, and we would go pick up my dad at his office, and we would go through the part where they were printing. Our company is a printing, started as a printing company, and we would go into the part where they were printing. And I remember vividly going through the corridors and watching all this small wheel cranes carrying loads of printed material, and the sound of the machines and the smell of the paper. And actually, until today, I grab a book and the first thing I do is open up the book and smell the paper because it's a very familiar smell for me.
When did you sort of like get closer to the family business as an adult? And sort of when did you start looking behind the scenes? And when did you first, I guess, get an idea of what the typical challenges are of actually running a family and a business and to keep those two things united?
I think it was later on because I left Colombia to go to university in the United States, got married, and went back to live in Ecuador outside of Colombia. And so I was away for 30 years, which is a long time. But about 12 years ago, a spot opened in the family council. And at that time, we didn't have periods. You just stay there for as long as you wished. And we go by branches. So somebody out of my family branch left, and they were going to choose somebody else. But I was living in Ecuador. And I raised my hand and said, I'm interested in being part of the family council. And they looked at me and they said, well, we only choose people who live here in Colombia. And I said, but I'm still interested. And so I was the first person that they chose from outside Colombia. And I said, are you willing to come in every month to family meetings? And I said, I'm willing, and I'm going to be the top person to be there. And I actually had a very good record of not missing any family councils. So I started in the family council, and at the same time, I started work the Family Business Network chapter for Ecuador. So those two things happened at the same time. And this was the first time that I actually sat in a meeting and kind of took all what it meant to be part of a family business.
So you joined 12 years ago. By that time, how long had the family council been active? So which generation actually started with the family council?
The family council started in 1995, and it started with the third generation with few members of the fourth generation. And it started because the third generation saw that they had grown up as siblings, not as cousins. Carvajal started in a garage of a house, and then the upstairs was where everybody lived, all the families and the cousins. So this is what I hear from the third generation. I mean, they would cross from one house to the other, and they lived really as siblings. And they realized that the fourth generation wasn't going to have that closeness of growing up together, and that there needed to be some rules of the game. And so they started meeting actually in my house. And my father was very keen on doing research on family business at the time. There was not a lot of things written of how to govern a family business, but they still managed to find an advisor, and they started working on a family protocol. They started meeting and immediately working on a family protocol. And those meetings continued, and it became the family council. And right now we have a big challenge. We always look at the norms, we put it up to date, but we realized recently that this family protocol was created with a fourth generation in mind. Like the third generation only visualized a fourth generation. And now we're asking all kinds of questions like, how is the family going to look in 20 years, seventh, eighth generation, and kind of putting up to date that family protocol for a longer vision. I mean, they had a vision, it's lasted 25 years, so it's good. But now, I mean, 30% of the family lives outside. That is going to grow. And so how do we imagine this family in 20 years being a united family? So yeah, a lot of interesting questions.
How do you manage the education of the next generation or of the family members with regards of what it is that you do as a family council and what they can come to you when they have concerns?
Carvajal is a very hard business to explain. And this has been a big motivation for me to have the family history so easy. And this is things that we work on different programs. And we're really working very hard on a development committee to be able to have what you say, to introduce to the youngsters what the business is, what do we do, the countries we're in. So we have different committees. One of them is the development committee. And we're working hard on trying to have like a yearly calendar where the family can listen to different talks with people who work in the business, telling them what they do. So we want two things: the family to learn and the family to feel closer to the business. So right now we're focusing, for example, on interviews with different people who work for the company. And so they can tell us something about their personal story, also how they got there, about their family, about the business. So we really want to start for the small children to learn about Carvajal. I'll tell you what we do right now, but this is our dream right now. I would say that from 18 and younger, we just rely on their parents telling them. And sometimes some cousins come to me and they say, I want them to do an internship. I really haven't done a really good job in teaching them what Carvajal does. So we can't rely on that anymore. But then from 18 on, you're introduced to the family protocol. You have to read it, you have to sign it. And from there on, there's a lot of family assemblies throughout the year. And Pedro addresses the family maybe 4 or 5 times a year to let them know how the business is doing, to let them know the challenges, to let them know what he's covered.
What do you do when communication fails? So, as the family council, how do you step in? What is sort of like your approach to make sure that things don't fester and I guess like poison the relationship of some family members with the Carvajal enterprise?
We started with a voting system to change the things in the family protocol 2 years ago. And we were terrified to see how many people disagreed because we had no idea, because everybody just kept quiet. And so we were, the first time everybody voted, we were so nervous. We were like, we don't know how many people are going to disagree. But it was very nice to see that every time now that we have to change something from the family protocol, we go through a vote, and we're happy to see people who disagree and who have different ideas and who nurture with those different ideas. But it was a big process. And I remember that when we were voting, there was something in the family protocol that said everything has to be by consent. And they would tell me, but you're asking to vote, which is first the consent, the vote. Can you really ask us to vote if it's by consent and nobody has approved the vote before the consent? So it was kind of hard. But now I think 2 years after that, the family is very happy that we have a voting system. And what I tell them is we have to leave this better for the next generations. If there's 300 of them and they're going to go by consent, I mean, it's never going to happen. So let's make this easier for them. Let's have a voting system. Let's make them agree or disagree by a voting system. And this is happening only in the family governance.
Looking to your peers now that are looking to set up their family council, what would be your advice to them? Like, if you see a family enterprise getting started with the notion of a family council, now that you've had this experience and now that you're the president as well of your own family council and you have your ambitions you want to fulfill, what are like the core pieces that you think a family needs to put into place in order to start off a family council successfully?
I would say that rules are very important. And I think that for me, what is key and what gives me tranquility is that I see a fifth, sixth, seventh generation having clear rules, and that makes it equal for everybody, and that makes it fair for everybody, and that gives you peace. So I think the family council starts because people see or families see that they need a structure and rules that they can get along with. And that's the hard part because it's not the fun part. So I would say that drill the hard part, and it's not easy to agree to have a family protocol, to maybe sit down and not know what to do, but that work that you do in the first few years turns into fun afterwards. We have fun at the family council thinking of different things that we can do to keep the family united. But I understand from what I've heard that coming and having the shareholders agreement or the protocol and we're actually working on a shareholders agreement that we didn't have. And I know how hard and how draining and how difficult it is. But if you stick to that hard part and you keep on going, then the fun part begins. And there's always going to be challenges. I'm happy that there's always going to be challenges and opportunities to be better. And as I said, all the energy that you put to work on your family shows, and all the energy you don't put into working with the family shows. So just start, I would say, and get through the difficult part of having all the rules written down. And just think that if you work on that hard stuff, you're going to leave it better for the next generation, for sure. And that's what motivates me, leaving this better than what I received. It's my biggest motivation every day to work on a family council.